I'm even, wondering like what does a fly on the wall see in those kind of conversations?
I love this. This is stuff that I don't get to talk about that often. That's a great question. I have no problem working harder for me and my family. It's the just work harder because that guy told you to thing that I think is problematic. Let's give them the manual to make social media work for them. Because if it's working for them, it's working for you too.
We'll start off by welcoming everybody to the Creative by Design. It's a conversation series where we explore what it takes to turn creative ideas into real brands, businesses, and opportunities. And today I'm joined with Jamie Brindle. I've actually been following you for a couple years, which is kind of a surreal full circle moment. An early digital mentor, I would call it. Even though I still do kind of some of the things that you tell us not to do as freelancers, but nonetheless,
Honestly,
happy.
I probably do too.
Yeah, exactly. You can't be perfect. You can only do so much. But yeah, I definitely appreciate you being with us today, and would love you to introduce yourself for people who don't know who you are.
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Jamie Brindle. My wife and I have a production agency in Los Angeles, sunny Los Angeles, California. I've been freelancing for the better part of 16 years now. And a couple years ago, I started talking about it on the internet to help my fellow practitioners with their freelance journeys. And that's what brings us here today. I think it's funny, no matter what service you provide, I've found this to be true. I can attest now after 3 or 4 years on social media, we're all going through the same stuff, and it's pretty industry agnostic.
Amen. No, and that's definitely the point. I think even when coming up with the name for the series, I wasn't somebody who was always into the creative field, and so I felt kind of out of place when I got here. And when I realized that even the most creative person was kind of just really having the same problems, it made me recognize that. Maybe there is a little bit of a community, and now all these years later, it's been like 8 years now. I've been doing design work. It's just great. I feel like to have an opportunity to educate people, and help them get through those barriers. But yeah, so I mean, I think the most interesting thing, and I found this out recently, that you started your career, I guess, 17, knocking on doors, selling ad time. So why don't you go into that a little bit for me?
Oh, man, yeah, those were the days. So I went to a high school where you could kind of declare a specialty, like the way that you declare a major in college. So I was it was a media arts and design specialty center. And they taught us how to use Photoshop. They taught us how to use Final Cut Pro. We could rent cameras out of the gear locker and take them out and make films. That was pretty sweet, but I'm I'm built to be entrepreneurial, I think. And within a few months of acquiring those skills, I started thinking, okay, what's next? What am I going to just keep making stuff for school for the next 4 years with all this information? So a buddy of mine and I started a video production agency in my hometown, Chesterfield, Virginia, and we would go shoot local commercials because that's all you did with digital video back then. Facebook was a place to actually just stay in touch with your friends. YouTube was just getting started. So we went door to door. That's how we started. We would go. I'd pull up to a strip mall. I'd park my car in a strip mall and go into each business and ask them, "Do you need a television commercial?" Right? And it took me about two strip malls to realize this is how green I was. It took me about two strip malls to realize that like the manager of our Blockbuster couldn't greenlight a commercial for Blockbuster. Like I was going into chain restaurants and everything, and they're going, "No, we can't do that." Yeah, so it became, I was okay. I got to find the independent businesses, and it was, I mean, everything had to be learned the hard way. As is the case with most freelancers, the first job came out of my network. It was a buddy's dad who had a law firm. And then the second job came out of that person's network. And then the third job came out of that person's network. and before you know it, we've got ourselves a little business.
Yeah, no, that's very cool, and completely so. Even myself, the best work that we've gotten has just been from who that person knows or might know, and you'd be surprised. I feel like I don't know if it's Alex Hermosi or one of those guys on YouTube always mentions like go look. I mean, ask your uncle, aunt, grandpa, somebody, niece, nephew, maybe if they're not that young. I'm sure there's someone they know that's doing something cool, and as you would say, you can scale the deliverables, so you don't have to move away from maybe a smaller person. um, I have to wonder though, how do you go from what does the transition look like from that kind of businesses to the Googles and the Fortune 500s?
Yeah. Yeah, it's about a 10 to 12 year transformation transition, It's I think that's a lot of people underestimate the patience required and the consistency required. I think that's really the name of the game. You any other skill set you can acquire pretty quickly, but I think if you really want to be successful in business, really develop that patience and consistency, because if you start freelancing and you're bummed that you're not freelancing for Google in the first 18 months, you're in for you're entering a world of pain, so it definitely was a long journey, but the way it worked out, if I can, I'll try uh, the Reader's Digest version here. We started with local commercials and negotiating airtime, and then that led to I was asked to film as a videographer to cover an event, like a B2B networking event. And that became kind of my bread and butter when I sussed out that there weren't a lot of people doing that the way that I like to do it. So I started doing a lot of B2B networking events. And naturally, at these events, you come into contact with execs, right? So I was sitting down with, at first, like an EVP of, some mid-level company. And before you know it, a couple years later, we're having, events with some of the top brands in the world, where I'm sitting down with the CEO of Pepsi or the CEO of Adobe or something like that. And, we start working with the agencies that those folks are talking to, because they're at those events. And we all start yucking it up and collaborating, and one thing leads to another, and you start working with those agencies, or you start working directly with the brands. I mean, I think the reason that it's not discussed, so much on social, because it's tough to like say it succinctly. It's a nuanced conversation, but it really does all come back to networking. More so now than ever. I think it's easy to post a piece of content about, um, building out a customer journey from social media to a freebie to a, lead magnet to an email to a nurture sequence to a, like, all of that is great, and that's great for one to many. But really, I mean, the freelancers that I see that blow up, that really get going with their businesses, they take all that effort and they just put it into building their network, and they put it into their communication skills.
Yeah, and I'm even wondering like what does a fly on the wall see in those kind of conversations? You're working or you're chumming it up with people of that stature. Is it much more different than a regular conversation? Is there like any sort of preparation you have towards that, or?
That's an excellent. I love this. This is stuff that I don't get to talk about that often. So that's a great question.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Yeah, because it's like, when you're confined to a 15-second reel, you don't get to explore this. Yeah, at first, it's different because you haven't learned that they're just people, right? At first, you think that there's something special going on behind that curtain, and that's to your detriment. That was to my detriment. I would overplan these conversations and just totally lose. I would tell a story in our uh, freelancing community about my first big pitch with a huge, you know, recognizable, like, I mean, tough to find anybody that doesn't know this brand, type brand. And I wrote on index cards my entire pitch. This was before Zoom. I was just going to get on a conference call with their team, and I sat there and I read from index cards for 20 minutes before I let them talk. You know, and now it's the opposite. I don't talk for the first 20 minutes of the call. I just keep prodding, keep asking questions. So at first, you treat those conversations differently to your detriment, but then you realize that they're just human beings trying to solve a problem, and they want to know if you can help. There's no difference between that conversation and any conversation that you or I have with somebody that we would hire to solve a problem for us. And I think the more I've been able to recognize that and to lean into that and to really just treat them like fellow humans on this journey of growth, the more successful I've been.
I think that I was watching something recently, of course, usually featuring Christo, and
Yeah.
it's it's always about asking the questions, right? And that's something that even myself, I think that I struggle with, always trying to like prescribe an idea instead of maybe asking and feeling around. Do you feel like, obviously, treating a human like a human person, that smaller business and the larger business feel the same, asking? I mean, it's different kinds of questions, but at the end of it, it's asking those questions and doing the quote unquote research there with them, and maybe after the fact, that actually leads to the better result. Is that something that you notice often, or is there really like a differentiation? I think maybe I want to remove the David versus Goliath on the big people, because I know that some people might be afraid to feel like they can reach out or try to see if they can help or work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. This might be one of those things that you just have to learn by experience, but I'll keep telling. Like I'll tell you as much as I can. It's when you sit across the table, there was, I remember a moment. I was at Google's office in LA, in Beverly Hills, and I'm sitting across the table from, it was, a team at YouTube. And I remember this moment vividly because I had just learned an interesting lesson about goal setting that they shared with me, which I can tell you in a bit. But B, I'm sitting across the table and I'm thinking, okay, this guy's like 5 years older than me. We live in the same city. We drove in pretty similar. We drove to work in pretty similar cars. I'm trying to do this. He's trying to do that. Like I just started seeing him as a person, as just a normal, um, and and it was transformative. That particular meeting, I remember it well. But the difference, I feel like they almost appreciate it more at that level because when you treat them like kind of use colloquial terminology, treat them like a colleague. Hey, we're just buddies. We're trying to. What are we up against here? How much do we have to spend on it? Just chatting like you're just with a group of friends. I think they appreciate it more um because so many people come to them stacked, right, with all kind of the jargon and I think the point I was gonna try to make, and I think I've rebutted it, before I even started making it, was that the folks that work in these places are pretty there's a lot of pressure on them. They're
Yeah.
pretty, they do seem to be they've kind of chosen this career for themselves, and they got to be on their A game, and they're surrounded by other A players that probably could take their job away from them if they get it wrong. But that's no different than being a small business owner too. So I would say there's no real difference there. Right? Because those guys have almost more to lose, because if their business goes under, they don't get to put that on a resume. It's like if you lose your job at Google, you get Google on your resume forever. Um, so I think in both instances, you have to approach it knowing that this person desperately wants a problem to be solved. It means a lot to them, and so they're going to benefit from that solution. But also, more often than not, they're auditioning what you're going to be like as a strategic partner. Like, are you going to be difficult to manage, or are you going to be coming at them with freaking, slideshows galore and spreadsheets and this and that, like, or is your approach more, let's get from A to B here? I was talking yesterday to an influencer on LinkedIn. We had a little chat, and I said my one of my go-to lines is, I want to be the thing that you worry least about this month. And you can always see, if you're in person, or at least hear on the phone, the collective sigh, in the room, where it's like, okay, this person gets it, right? It's not just about, because there's a line out the door of people that can solve the problem. So that's what got you in the room. But that's not what's going to get you the job. What's going to get you the job is, can you solve the problem, uh, and be chill? Like, can you solve the problem and be a buddy? Will it be a pleasure to
Yeah.
hear from you? You know?
It's always about the vibe check at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I've
People like
I
to
was
work with people, yeah, that they're gonna enjoy themselves with.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I think again, this is bad. Again, it was a Christo video, and I can't. It was a recent one. I can't remember who he was talking to, but the person on the episode had worked with Gary Vee and had also worked with Alex Hormozy, and was talking about how there was like so many meetings just to get involved in the company, and like one of them was basically like a vibe check meeting. It was like, okay, we've gotten to a certain point. We know that the skills are probably there and everything else is there, but now like how is it actually just talking to you? What are your interests? And I think that's kind of maybe a more maybe recent idea. I think maybe some older generations would have toughed it out with people that they maybe didn't mess with. But I think there's like a little bit of protecting peace, especially in the creative industry, that we're always kind of trying to do. With that being said, I actually noticed that you on your story mentioned that you are closing down your existing business and starting a new one. That seems like
Yeah.
the opposite of protecting your peace. So why don't
Yeah.
you fill us in on that a little bit?
Well, you say that, but it actually is a little bit, because our two businesses, up to a point, were A, our video production business, and then B, this kind of education social media business, right? And we purposefully, when we started, we made the decision not to make content for our agency clients, because this was COVID, people were losing their jobs, and they were really worried about it. And Courtney and I sat in the office and said, we can help these people. Like, there's a lot of information that we take for granted. Let's just make some content for them. And because I genuinely believe, whether you chose to or were forced out of a 9 to 5, something great has just happened. You get to now build something for yourself, and I wanted to preach that message and try and help people get there, get their mindset there too. Uh, but in doing that, we created this business that has nothing to do with this business, essentially. I mean, there were some benefits, like, we'd get on a call with a major brand, and they'd recognize me from TikTok, despite the fact that I wasn't making content for them. Um, but really, the decision to shut down the video business and start what we're starting now, which is a social media strategy business, was so that one effort could benefit the other. So anything we're doing over here on social media for our freelancing audience benefits our social media strategy business, so we can be our own case study, and be testing things, for our
I
clients.
actually really love that you say that. That's kind of the same approach for us at the design studio that I run. We decided to make essentially. I got tired, and this is maybe kind of like a maybe like a counterpoint to the idea of like being a prudent freelancer. But I said, you know what? I'm like, I don't know if I want to sell myself to anybody. I grew up playing sports and in the music industry, and I just felt like, man, there's been a lot of proving in like very like salesman, kind of ways. And I'm like, I just don't know if I love that. I'd rather let's just make a business. Like we'll just do something. And then from doing that business, people will see that we can do the things that they want to then hire us for because we're doing it actually for real in real life. And so, I kind of came up, well, I didn't come up with this concept, but, I phrased it as branding by doing. And I've been noticing a lot of studios. Yeah, thank you. I've noticed a lot of studios have been kind of leaning into that. It's like they do the service work, and obviously maybe they do or don't like it. And the idea is to kind of bring up now something of their own because they have all these skills. They've just spent time and effort doing that to, be on socials, have their businesses running. Why not just leverage that instead of the selling. And I think that's kind of almost masterful, for you to even think that way as well. You're like, well, shit, I'm doing it here. I might as well just sell it over here instead of being in a completely different category for most things.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. So first off, it's really hard to start any freelance venture, but second off, it's nearly impossible to do it without examples of success, right? Which is a catch-22 or it appears to be a catch-22 for a lot of freelancers getting started, and so much so that many use it as an excuse not to get started. But the easy answer is do it for yourself, right? If you can do it for yourself, you can do it for others, and you can continually use yourself as a case study. So that's you know that's the best advice I can give you getting started is like, hey, go out there and make yourself a client. Make some examples of this success on your own dime, essentially, your own attention dime. Um, but yeah, and it is funny how, like a lot of things in my career, how you just kind of accidentally discover it. It's not even at this stage, like it's really easy to look at somebody else's career and say, oh, X, Y, and Z, take two and call me in the morning. But with your own career, it's I found myself we'd be on these calls with clients for video strategy, and the conversation would arrive at social media, and they go, hey, you're doing a lot of this. You're talking to a lot of people in this space. What are you seeing? And then I talk for 45 minutes about what they should be doing, and they're furiously taking notes. And and I had to do that 20 times before I went, wait a minute. This is, this is a whole thing I could package. This isn't just me shooting the shit with our clients about their social media. But yeah.
No, that's awesome. I was gonna say I feel like this is the perfect segue to bring up your directing and production career. These short films that I came across, which I didn't even know. I mean, I don't know if you publicly talk about that, but I had no idea. So talking about just falling into careers and opportunities, I'm sure that's plugged in somewhere between studio and ads. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole reason I'm in LA. You come out here to I have a friend who's a retired costumer. He worked with Tom Hanks and Michael Keaton and Robin Williams, and he has a saying. He'd always go, "Hey man, hey Brindle, if you want to make cars, move to Detroit. If you want to make movies, move to LA. That's what you do out here." And that's why I drove across the country, was to be a part of that experience, and that's something that's still going on for us. We never hurts to have an audience in this town. So I'm sure at some point in time there may come a meeting or two where we're putting together a film idea, and I say, hey, I got 500,000 freelancers that might be interested in watching this movie. Uh, but it is interesting, you know, that industry in particular is seeing a real change. And a real, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not a comeuppance, but really the social media world is having a serious effect on the film and television world. So much so that we're seeing them kind of start to merge, right? And I locked onto that right around the time we started our social media, where I said, okay, this is, rather than go through, the development door or the acquisition door of a studio, to to be put in front of a group of people, why not just create a group of people, so that's where it's all headed for sure. But in terms of producing that stuff, that's lots of life's lessons there. That's, I mean, and also we're dealing with freelancers on a massive scale when you think about a film set, right? Sets that I've worked on that where I'm directing, you know between crew, extras, and cast, you're looking at hundreds of people, and and they're all freelancers, they're all independent contractors, and so there were lots of learning experiences there for sure.
I would definitely love for you to elaborate on some of those. I feel like obviously it's allowed you, like the consortium of experience and knowledge has allowed you to get to here and even feel like start like closing down one business and starting up another one is I'm not gonna call it easy, but obviously like a no-brainer direction for you. So I mean, to get that kind of agility, you know, and acumen, there must be a lot of learned.
Yeah, I mean, I think it like anything else, it's a cliche, but it's accurate. Is that we fear what we don't understand, right? Or we fear what we haven't experienced. Fear in the physiological sense. It's just it's our mind trying to protect us. And the you know, getting out there and doing a lot uh, uh, numbs that programming, right? Or it reprograms that experience. So I think that's been the main benefit is that I at scale get to see what others are up to and learn from them. But I also put myself in situations that at the moment probably feel uncomfortable or really big, and then the second that's over with, it no longer feels big. So I just keep redefining what big and uncomfortable means to me. So I think that that's been a you know uh, a beneficial or a key benefit of that whole journey is that just your creativity when 120 people are waiting on you, feels a lot different than your creativity sitting at a desk. And so suddenly now, if I'm on a call with a client that some might consider, you know, uh, huge, like a some awesome opportunity, uh, I'm thinking, well, at least I don't have 120 people waiting on me on the universal backlot to make a decision about this shot. Like it's suddenly it's not that big of a deal. And so I think that the more of those experiences that a business owner can accumulate, the better, because then you kind of acquire this sense of, well, this isn't going to kill me, so proceed.
Yeah, it's interesting you use the word numbing because, you know, I never really thought of it that way, but I guess that's kind of what, you know, that like exposure therapy does, you know, it's like a callus, you know, like an auratic, if that's a word, like an aura-based callus where you're just like, you know, at this point I got it. Like and at this point there's no point in turning back because the worst thing that we've also ever experienced has already happened and now the only thing that we have potentially is some happy accidents forward. I
Exactly.
love
I
that.
think that is true. Like we also, speaking of happy accidents, sorry to cut you off, but like there are so many people. I get the benefit now of, the thousands of DMs conversations that I have with other freelancers. And there are so many people that reach out and ask about failure specifically, and say, I just need to, I don't want to, some version of, I don't want to fuck this up. Like, I don't want to have a bad, I have this client meeting. I don't want to fuck it up. Or I have a business plan, but I don't want to get started because I know I'm going to mess it up. Um, and the answer is like, that's the point. Like you have to mess it up. You have to, like, that means you're growing. Like if you're not doing that stuff, what are you doing? So, and I think that is, if it, and the more you can fail on a massive scale, not in a way that like takes you out of the game, right? But like the more you can get out there and fail and embarrass yourself, the quicker you get past that part of the journey.
Yeah, again, this is gonna be crazy how many times I mentioned Christo. I think this is really bad, at this point,
I'll
but
text him after this and tell him to just stay away from you.
at this point, because it's like, I mean, it's funny. I bought this new stationary bike, and I had seen some other video. I think it was by Ali.
Yeah,
I'm
Ali
not,
Abdal.
yeah, yeah, Ali Abdal, and I think he had mentioned maybe it was him, talking about like pairing things that you don't like with something that you do like. I could be totally wrong about this, but it was like I want to do the stationary bike, and I'm like, well, what better thing to do than I saw there was like a mini docu series like Day in the Life Chris Do. I'm like, dude, that's what I'm gonna watch. 21 minutes, that's perfect. That's how much time I need to be on there. But no, I feel like he always kind of mentions this idea of like that's the toll, like that's what you have to pay. The creative entrepreneurial pay to enter is the failure, and if you don't have enough of those, then I don't unfortunately think that you have, as I mean, obviously, as easy of a time, you know, like the more mistakes you can make, which people are so fearful of, actually bring like the most values. You know, there are no losses, in fact there are just lessons, and if you can have more of those, you have a better advantage and maybe a better position to be in whatever industry or have whatever opinion or perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I and I think Chris would probably agree with this. Is like that's not exclusive to creative freelancers either. Like that's just life, baby. Like it's like literally, I mean, it's true that life shrinks and life expands based on your willingness to take on risks, right? And it's your if you're willing to, you know, put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, you get to reap the benefits of it, you know? And it's just a fact of the matter. I think that failure or hurt or, you know, any uncomfortable outcome of anything is just the price of entry, right? It's the price we pay, you know, to live this blessing called life. And our objective is to get the most out of, you know, most out of our money, you know, get the most out of that cost. So it truly is. I've said this a number of times about freelancing, but it's true about life. Is you know, freelancing is write your own adventure, right? It's, you remember those books, those choose your own adventure books? It's that you literally at any moment, every moment carries it with it the power to choose to do something, right? Like, and I think with freelancing, it's particularly potent because truly, like, you don't have to go to a boss to say, you know, hey, I really think we should be doing this right now. Like, give me a team, and I'm going to go off and chase this lead down, or I'm going to go off and chase this idea down. You don't have to go to a boss and say, you know, I'd really like to be making twice as much money as you're paying me right now. Could you make that happen? You know, it's like truly with freelancing, you get to, like, at any moment you get to decide, okay, I'm now going to build the version of this business that makes twice as much, and I'm going to chase that down, and we'll be there in 6 months. You know, it's a really beautiful experience.
I agree. I think that's actually like the first. Oh man, again, another Christo. The when I was getting into graphic design, because I think again, like I was an athlete. I played football in college, and I always kind of dabbled in like singing when I was younger, but you know I never thought that would be a career, and I eventually got into it and essentially made no money. It was a very different time than it is now, where you can maybe blow up on the internet overnight. And so I was trying to find like mentors. You know, that's what the initial search on the internet was find mentors. And you know, there's obviously if you can't find them in person, I had to settle for like digital mentors. Whether I don't know if it's really settling, but you know, I come across Michael Beirut, graphic designer, and then I learned about Massimo Vignelli, who was his mentor. And you know, there's a deep dive into that. And then being in the graphic design realm, I end up coming across Chris Do, and I feel like when I heard that Chris Do had mentioned doing $250,000 brand client, I said, I'm thinking about what have I been doing my whole life? You know, and I think the ability to be able to negotiate that, like a regular person would have to work themselves to the bone at a corporate 9 to 5 job, climbing up to get into a position where they could be somebody in that even close to sniffing that amount of money. To me, it like makes no sense to bet on someone else's business, and it makes all the sense in the world to turn that effort and energy onto yourself and bet on yourself. You can control more of the things than you can.
Yeah, I think now more than ever, major brands are comfortable with freelancers, even more so than comfortable. I think they're actively seeking them out. I mean, in America alone, we're going to be the majority of the workforce in within 2 years. By 2027, we're going to be a
That's
majority
crazy.
freelance workforce. So, like, the word doesn't mean what it used to, right? Freelancer used to mean kind of gun for hire, somebody that would give a desk for a few weeks, and like now it means, you know, a a a straight up specialist, you know, a straight up killer who's going to come in here, who's got some serious expertise on one area, going to come in here and solve a bunch of problems for us, right? Or solve one really big problem for us. So, you know, these brands are really excited about the innovation that can be done at the freelancing level, like versus bringing in a big heavy agency to do something. You know, let's just bring in a killer, right? Who can come in and iterate real quick and solve this problem for us. And it's, you know, I think that, you know, it's super beneficial for people to share those success stories. And I'm always a little allergic to sharing my own. Like, I never want to talk money too much or talk brands too much because it feels icky. But also, what you just described is incredibly valuable. Where it's like, hey, if you can share, you know, what's possible, because a lot of people don't know what's possible until they see it. You know, and Chris did a great job of that. Chris has done a great job of you know, spreading that gospel. But yeah, it's like it's now more so than ever, those types of deals are being done. And then to address what you mentioned, I love what you said about betting on yourself versus going and building this for somebody else because I had this conversation maybe a year ago with some friends of ours who were 9 to 5ers, and again, like, props to 9 to 5ers, no disrespect, right? But I think you and I probably know which side of that argument we're on, and I think most of the people in your audience know what are on our same side of the argument. So I'm speaking to us, right? We're amongst we're in good company here.
In
Uh,
the club, we all fam.
yeah, yeah, exactly, precisely. Uh, I that one got Courtney laughing. She's over there working while we're chatting.
Yeah, the team in the back had a giggle too.
Yeah, yeah. We but freelancers, business owners, so traditionally, if you want to create substantial wealth, right? Pretty much the two paths you have available to you are the stock market and real estate, right? Like you use your job to make the money that you then put into one of those two wealth vehicles to grow wealth, right? Scalable wealth. Freelancers and business owners have a third asset class, and that's our business, right? And we it's interesting because it kind of is self-sustaining. It pays itself. So we take the money that we get from our work to subsidize the investment. So it's interesting. Well, where else can you take money, invest it in the right place, and double your money? Other than Vegas, where else can you do that, right? And it's a really sweet um, uh, kind of it's what's the word I'm looking for? Not untapped because plenty of people are doing it, but it's an open secret, I guess. And I think that we're at this point. I'm calling it Workforce 3.0, where I think a lot of people are identifying that, and I think that very in the very near future. Um, a lot of traditional 9 to 5 models are going to start transitioning to kind of an aggregation of freelancers where it's a bunch of people with LLCs that are banding together to solve a problem, and we'll call that a corporation. I think that I mean, obviously there are going to be 9 to 5ers, till the end of time, but I do think that more and more folks are, saying, hey, how about we approach this fractionally, both on the hiring side and on the implementing side, saying, what if we just put together 3 experts, put them at the table, and have them solve the problem versus going and hiring, a couple people and keeping them on for however many years. I think that's where it's headed. And I think that I mean, it's only to the benefit of freelancers.
Yeah, it's really ironic. That's your sentiment. The business that I'm not going to say attempting, that we are building, Night School. For a bit we were kind of trying to find. We wanted to be in a creative education space, but I felt like everyone is kind of creatively educating, and that's great. I think more. Again, as being someone who was I would say like a non-creative, essentially, at least to my knowledge. Maybe it could have always been the case, but to my knowledge, non-creative, getting into the creative sphere, seeing how it works, seeing the flexibility, seeing the potential, whether it's, Christo talking about $500,000, $250,000 deals, or a 17-year-old kid who dropped out of school and made a sex chocolate and now is a millionaire, or friend there from not Design Pickle, Design Joy, who's making $1 million doing which I definitely tried to do that one. I tried to do the subscription model design work for about 1 month, and I quit because it was the biggest pain. I think the more people have access to those notions, people discussing that, um, people even just showing the results of that, which is why I love YouTube as like my favorite social platform. I think more people will realize that the corporations need them, and that they don't need the corporations. And that's really what we're trying to prescribe at Night School now, is this idea of like targeting that 5 to 9er. Like there are people who are dreading going to work in the morning, do it for the paycheck. They finish up and they get right into that thing that they love so much. And they'll overwork. You know, I have someone on the team, my producer, he's like in school for nursing and also doing the work here, doing the work for night school. And it's like, because how can you stop? If that's what you love, how can you really stop it? You know, and I always tell him, as he sits behind me now talking about him, that eventually I'm gonna convince him, maybe to come here full time. But like just the idea that, again, like I couldn't imagine having to know in my heart of hearts, fuck, I gotta wake up today. I gotta go have somebody else tell me what to do. I don't really get to have the freedom of thought or the free, like the autonomy of action. I really have to just fucking sit here and do what's been prescribed to me and live that and come home and repeat, repeat, repeat. I really would rather die, in fact, as dramatic as that is. It's so heart wrenching for me.
Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, I lasted. I don't talk about this that often, but I worked at a 9 to 5 right out of college. I worked at a 9 to 5 for 3 months, and it was a, uh, it was almost like a panic response to being an adult. Like it's like I graduated college, and my whole life I'd been freelancing, I'd been making movies, I've been saying I'm going to move to Los Angeles and make movies there, and the second I graduate college, I get a job at an association in Washington, D.C., and I moved there. I put on a suit and tie and I work in a cubicle for 3 months. And it was like I think I just needed to experience it. Probably, I probably just needed to know that it wasn't for me.
Hmm.
And I remember, at the time thinking, hey, I have the opportunity. I could make up to 70 grand a year if I'd play this right in the next 2 years. That was kind of I said those words, and but it was almost as instantaneous as the decision to do that was, came the decision to get the fuck out of there. And again, loved the whole group because they were my first client when I went back to freelance, that company, and they're great people, and I got paid more freelancing for them than I ever got paid working for them. But it was everything that you just alluded to, where it's like, you kind of show up. And I remember there was a moment where, again, this is a lot. We made a lot of progress in 3 months to have arrived at this moment where I was working on a presentation for the CEO of the company. I was a coordinator working on a presentation for the CEO of the company, which is, a little outside the scope of what I was being paid to do. But they figured out that I was a creative and I could do editing and design and all that stuff. And so, I was tasked with this job, and I said, okay, I'll do it, but I got to be at home. I'm not going to bring in at that point, a terabyte, an external hard drive was this big, and it was now they're this. But I was like, I'm not bringing all my stuff in every day to work on this and then bring it back home to work on my own stuff. And they said, okay, we get that. You can go work from home for the week. And then I just stopped coming in because I was being so productive at home. And finally, there was a Tuesday when I just like walked in to check in, and my boss calls me into his office and says, Brindle, you gotta come to work, man. And I was like, I am working. And he said, no, you have to come in. And I was like, why? Like, I'm getting so much more done from home. Like I'm phoning into the meetings, and like, but like I'm like while I'm at the meeting, I'm doing the other stuff. I've done like, 3 weeks of work in a week. He goes, well, because you have to be here. And I was like, why? And I like literally like I kind of the door was shut behind me, and I had a friendly relationship with this guy. He wasn't that much older than me, and I was like, why, man? And he's like, because you have to be here. And I said, okay, I just want to hear you say that you just want to justify the existence of this building, And I said in a joking way. This wasn't controversial, I wasn't arguing with the guy. But that's what it was, and now it's silly because now I think everybody's clued into that, post COVID. I think a lot of companies with the remote work situation are going, oh yeah, why are we doing this? But that was the beginning of the end for me. Was I was like, oh no, 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 this isn't. I'm gonna go do my own thing.
I think you kind of hit it on the head. It is I think dated to think that, and the finance person we have on our team kind of broke it down to me the other day, when we were looking at some of our stuff, and he said it's like, you have three arms, and one of those is productivity, where maybe that wasn't considered before. as drivers of revenue or success, which is really stupid, in my opinion, to think that beforehand we just accepted people giving 9 hours in an office, whether they were playing fucking garbage can basketball or doing the work. And that was totally valid, just because then it justifies this big skyscraper with a big logo on it that lets people know that, we're the boss in town. And it's crazy to imagine that they never considered, is this more productive? And it's ironic that now, COVID happens, and that's what makes it so clear to them that everyone's at home, but they're doing more work, guys. And you would think, this maybe $1 million skyscraper, maybe we don't need it and we can spend some money somewhere else.
Yep.
And that
Yep.
would benefit us better. So it's really
Maybe we could pay
ironic.
our people more. Yeah.
Oh, just maybe a little bit, right? Like it's so silly to me. And I think it's kind of it's those ideas of like the corporate life that just like I'm just like a straight shooter. So for me to like think about that kind of stuff, I'm the guy that's like asking, but why? When like the ASM's telling me to do, I'm like, but why? That just makes no sense. Like, why would we do that? And they're like, well, because you have to. And I'm like, listen, you know what? Maybe I was told as a kid I had oppositional defiance disorder, which I had never heard of until
That's
I was told
bullshit,
that
man. That's not a
I
real thing. Yeah.
I swear to God.
That's just being intelligent. Yeah.
And it's because I'm like, dude, like you can't bring the bullshit around here, like
Yeah.
I get it, and this is not right. No, I love that. That's really funny. And so I mean, now like obviously you're not switching up the business, but moving into a new direction. Are you excited? What do you feel like is in store? Not just for yourself, but I mean even for like creativity as an industry at large, social media content. I feel like there's kind of a little bit of that future stuff to unpack.
Yeah, I mean, one day at a time. It's all fun and exciting. I think primarily what I'm looking forward to is I don't know. I think that there are a lot of opportunities to subcontract with this particular venture, which I'm looking forward to. I always like getting other people paid. That's a one of my favorite parts of the gig, right? Is bringing in other freelancers. We've got kind of our merry band of freelancers that we work with on the video stuff. So I'm looking forward to that, building out that team. But I think that some of the most exciting stuff here is just where it's all heading. I think that we're coming to a point where and it's interesting that COVID has come up so many times because it's wild how like defining that has been in
It
business.
100%. I mean, how could it not? We had to literally figure out almost how to unfuck a fucked situation
Yeah,
and
yeah.
make sure
It's
that people could not only make enough money but not die by going outside. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
like
It's a couple small targets to hit here. Like make enough money, don't die. Yeah. No, I think that COVID sent us all in a direction of the internet, right? And like I read recently an article um, about how Nike overcorrected too much, like Nike went to digital too much, and at the expense of their relationships with their retailers, and that opened up shelf space for Hoka and OnCloud, which are now huge companies. Um, and now Nike's coming back to kind of relationship with their retailers. I think the same thing is kind of happening with social media, where it's like we all went to social media because of COVID, essentially, right? And I think that now we're seeing this really cool marriage of social media and real life, right? Not that social media isn't real life, but like this really cool marriage of social media and human to human exchange. So I'm interested in where that's going, and what that's going to look like with the clients that we work with. Also, I'm really excited about the the scenario that we discussed, where it's like, more and more we're seeing, uh, workforce 3.0, permissionless work, where people are, empowered to kind of build their own thing for themselves. And, I've already started having these conversations with potential clients of ours, and, clients of ours that are that were agency clients that are now probably going to be clients over here. where it's like, okay, well, let's empower all of your employees to be, what I'm calling intralancers. Let's empower them all to be freelancers within the corporate space, right? And let's give them the manual to make social media work for them. Like, because if it's working for them, it's working for you too. And so there's a lot of that going on that I'm excited about. So it's one of those what a time to be alive type moments where there's a lot of change in the air. I mean, when isn't there? Change is the only constant. But in this particular space, I feel like us as humans and our relation to work, um, you know, is evolving, in a pretty transformational way right now. So I'm excited to be like right in the thick of it.
No, 100%. I mean, obviously, like starting this conversation series is my attempt at personal branding, and in essence, because I've heard it so much at this point, and I'm seeing, even with how, I mean, I think Alex Hermosi kind of went like business first and then like personal brand second, and he even mentioned that like he didn't want to make one until he felt like there was enough to talk about. But I see someone like Gary who like obviously was working, but then kind of was like, well, let me use this as like a thing that I can have parallel to the business so that it can just help kind of accelerate. I mean, the internet has eyes, and in order to, I would imagine, have successful business across the internet, you need to be able to capture eyes, whether it's not necessarily as many as possible, but as many good ones as possible. Good, I say in quotation. Um, that I'm excited to be on the ride and the journey, and I see a similar kind of idea, like even with the team as well. I tell them like, just give me your availability for the week, and I'll tag you in for work in those hours. Where I want to be like deadline oriented. I don't want to be, considering too much of like, if you want to travel and go somewhere, sick. As long as we get what we got to do and get it done, all means that like, you're able to travel safely and things like that. Do it. Like, go fly somewhere, be at your grandma's house. I don't really care. Let's just make sure we get that work done for that day. And because I'd never want I already mentioned like that looming feeling of like the corporate like death choke of like like just I don't want to burden anybody with that. I don't want to be burdened with it. So it's I think refreshing to understand maybe that could be the new way of working. For our like the generation before us was probably a little more work your ass to the bone. Even my dad, being a person in HVAC, it's like it's all about how hard you have to work to get the money. And I kind of sit back and think like, man, a kid literally with $1,000 a month grew this sex chocolate, which I mentioned now for the second time.
The
Uh,
rankings of the show is Chris Snow, Sex Chocolate. Yeah.
but the fact that he did that, I mean, it just blew my mind because he's like, dude, let me just get some. This was like at the pinnacle of like UGC content. He's like, let me go find some content creators. They'll make the content for me. I'll pay them to make the content, and we'll have a bunch of accounts and we'll scale this business. And now he's like a kid that was basically dropping out of college, and now he's potentially making $1 million a year. It's like, why do we want so badly to just work harder? Like it makes no sense. Let's just get better. Let's leverage some skills. Let's work a little less. Let's do it for more money. And let's actually like think about living life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, it's one of those things where it goes back to what we talked about where, it's the third asset class. Like I have no problem working harder for me and my family, like to build an asset for us. It's the just work harder because that guy told you to thing that I think is problematic. And we always say like, we're here to help freelancers build businesses that are scalable and sustainable. Based on that freelancer's definition of sustainability, right? And success. Like, so it's like because some people like I enjoy the work. Like I enjoy working my ass off, but like there are other people that want to work 4 hours a week, and there's a version of success that makes sense for that too. You just back into it, right? It's just you put, what success looks like to you on a sheet of paper, and then you just design the journey to get there. And I think that the freedom to do that is what's so so exciting about where we are today, because I think before you didn't really have as many paths to that as possible, right? Like you basically had to work your ass off, get the money, and if you did it enough for long enough, then you could maybe, take your vacation, or, or work less or whatever. And it's like now it's like, no, you can skip right to the work less part if you're intentional about how you design your business, right? Or if you want to put a bunch of, man hours into it, you can do that too. In fact, you can do it even better now because of all the, technology available to us. We can work smarter so that we can work harder. Like that's, you no longer have to, wait for XYZ. You no longer have to wait to make this much money to hire these people. Now you can use AI to help you with that, right? Now you can bring on a freelancer for a week to help you with that. So I just think that it's the freedom now to chart the path from, A, where you stand, to B, where you want to be, is, we've never seen that, I think. And I think that that's what a lot of people are, um, trying to put their finger on. And I think that, that's, you know, the more we can get the word out that that's real and that's a possibility, the better.
I don't think I could have picked a better moment to put a period on this, because that was very, very, very beautifully summarized. And I think kind of the idea again of the series, like even through the name, like it's there is some kind of architecture to maybe that richness or that life that you want. And it's figuring that out. It's having the freedom to figure that out. It's knowing that there are different options and customizations that now you have the ability to kind of sort together to find that, I was watching a Daniel Dalen video yesterday talking about finding your rich life. If that's what is enriching and rich to you, damn, it's great that you have now the independence to do that, the autonomy to do that, and even potentially the finances if you've found that thing for yourself via the internet. Well, listen, I want to give you an opportunity to be able to tell people how they can further connect with you, if you have any communities or anything of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, come find me anywhere on the internet, any social media, the Jamie Brindle, right? I'm pretty active everywhere. Instagram's where we got started, but we're all over. Send me a message, and let's just chat. We've got our freelancing program, the freelancing program, .com, and that's a place where there's some education, but more importantly, there's community and accountability. So if that feels like your particular brand of whiskey, feel free to join us over there as well. And let's chat. Let's talk some more.